Using your Fujifilm camera is so ergonomically simple, it's like reading green eggs and ham. However, understanding the Q menu is more like trying to read the Iliad in Russian. Let's figure this thing out once and for all. Hi everyone, welcome to Pal to Tech. Today we're talking about two Fujifilm camera features that often overlap together, the Q menu and the custom settings feature. Let's start with the Q menu. The Q menu can be accessed by pressing the Q button. Now for the next few minutes of this video, I want you to completely ignore this rectangle in the upper left corner right here. Just forget about it. We'll get back to it in a little bit. The Q menu is basically a feature on your Fujifilm camera that allows you to quickly pull up a bunch of camera option settings that you can adjust. On some Fujifilm camera models, you can further customize how many options appear in this grid by going into your menu and selecting button dial setting. On some camera models, such as the X-T4, they have two completely separate quick menus, one for still shooting and one for movie shooting. And right here you can change it, for example, to 8 slots only. You can also customize the look of the menu if you go into Screen Setup. And again, you can change it for either stills or movie shooting, and you can change it from black to transparent if you want to. Now, when you go into the Q menu, it's transparent. So the Q menu basically allows you to assign whatever commonly used camera settings you prefer to these little squares right here. You basically select the one you want, and you can do so using the joystick on the back of the camera or the D-pad buttons. Once you find a setting that you want to change, and it's highlighted like this, then you use the rear command dial to change the various options of that specific setting. So here I'm rotating the command dial, and as you can see, the film simulations are changing, and I can select one. I'll go ahead and choose Classic Chrome. Then, to save the choice that you made, simply either press the Menu OK button on the back of the camera, or you can half press the shutter button. Now, when you go back into the Q menu, you will see that your setting has been saved. Now the camera will shoot in Classic Chrome. The entire point of the Q menu is to save you time. Suppose, for example, I want to take a photo of myself with a group, and I want to set the camera to a 10-second self-timer. In order to do that, I would have to go into the menu, go into the camera icon, go down to self-timer, blah, 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 choose 10 seconds, and then now that will work. However, the Q menu makes it very fast. I simply press the Q button, scroll down to where I've already pre-assigned one of these squares to the self-timer option, rotate the command dial, then press menu, and I'm done. It's faster to use the Q menu for these sort of things. Let me give you another great example for the X-T4 when shooting movies. On the X-T4, when you rotate the still movie dial to movie, you get a completely dedicated Q menu. I can go right into the Q menu, you see that? Scroll down to one of my pre-assigned buttons, rotate the command dial. Now I'm shooting in 60 frames per second. It's much faster than digging into the menu for that. You can also use the touch screen on the camera with the Q menu as well. Here's how you do that. Make sure that your touch screen is turned on. Go into button dial setting, and its touch screen setting, make sure that it is turned on. Once it is, as soon as you go into the Q menu, you can simply touch one of these items, and then you can choose an option just like this. You'll notice that there are blue triangles on the left and the right of some of these choices. That indicates there are more menu items that you can choose. Simply take your finger and you can kind of slide it this way to the left or to the right to access more of these options. Again, once you've selected one, half press the shutter to save it. So here's how you add, edit, and remove which setting squares appear in your Q menu. To start, you simply press and hold down the Q button for 2 seconds. Press and hold it down, just like this. Training has been interrupted by a special public service announcement. Fujifilm, please, pretty please with a cherry on top, please put some kind of visual indicator to tell us that we are now in the edit mode of the Q menu. For example, when you just quickly press the Q button, or if you press and hold down the Q button for 2 seconds, the screens look almost identical, and it's difficult to know if you're in edit mode or normal Q menu mode. That would help a lot. Put like a yellow border around it if you're in edit mode or something like that. Okay, anyway, back to the show. So to edit the Q menu, you simply press and hold down the Q button for 2 seconds just like this. You are now in edit mode of the Q menu. When you find one of the squares that you want to change, press the Menu OK button. Then you can just assign some other setting to that. Let's go with self-timer, and there it is. And you can repeat this process so that you can assign these squares to whatever custom settings you want to have. When you're all finished, press the Menu OK button to save the changes, or you can lightly press the shutter button. You also don't have to have a custom setting assigned to every single square. For example, you could take one of these squares that you don't use and just assign it none. Now when you go into the Q menu, it's just blank. Okay, now we come to part 2 of this video where we discuss custom setting packages. The first thing that you need to know is that this square located right here in the upper left corner is no different than any other settings square in this Q menu. You can actually change this to anything you want. So for example, I could edit this and make it autofocus mode instead, but I recommend leaving it on select custom setting because we're going to bring these two concepts together in just a bit. This single Q menu square that you see right here by itself provides you with the ability to select from a few custom preset setting packages that you can set up, each one containing various pre-configured camera settings that you can set up in any way that you wish. Now, Fujifilm will often refer to them as custom settings, but I'm going to refer to them as custom setting packages. On the X-T3 and X-T4 cameras, you can get up to 7 custom setting packages. Other Fuji cameras that offer this feature do have different amounts. Now you can set up and edit these packages from 2 different places. The first is if you go into your menu settings into the IQ section, you'll see them right here. You see where it says Edit, Save, Custom Setting, and Select Custom Setting. So for example, here they are, 7 different packages of settings which I could select, and I could edit them as well from this area of the menu. The other place that you can access these custom setting packages would be to go into the Q menu. Once you're in the Q menu, press and hold down again on the Q button while you're in the Q menu. You are dropped right into the Edit, Save, Custom Setting area. So let's quickly set up a custom package and you'll see why you'd want to use this. I'm going to leave Custom 1 alone, but I'm going to change Custom 2 to something different. Right now it's Velvia Film Simulation. First thing I'm going to do is rename it. I'm going to call it Street Moody. Go ahead and set. Now that I've named it, let's make it Street Moody. Go back in here, edit. Let's start by changing the film simulation to black and white. Okay, why not? Let's use Acros. Let's add some grain, strong grain. Let's kick up our dynamic range a little bit. And something to note that most of the settings that you can assign to these custom packages have to do with JPEG files. They have to do with things like sharpness, clarity, film simulations, and so forth. Bring down my highlights a little bit and increase my shadows. Go back. Do I want to save it? Yes, I do. And I've just saved it to Street Moody, okay? So as you can see, instead of saying Custom 2, it now says C2 with the name that you gave it. And you can repeat the same process for all of these. So now you've saved that custom preset package called Street Moody, okay? So let's say now you're out and about with your camera and you're shooting in Provia. You can go into your menu, into the IQ section, and select the custom setting that you had previously saved. So I'm gonna select Street Moody, boom. Now, if I go back to my camera, I'm ready to go. All of those settings that were pre-assigned to that package that I created called Street Moody are immediately assigned to the camera, and the camera is going to use all of them until I change it. And in addition, even though I'm in Street Moody, I could further refine on the fly. I could change it. If I wanted to quickly go to color, I could change it back to here. But all of those other settings that I had in Street Moody are still there. The only thing that's changed at this point is the color. And again, if I want to go back and reset it to Street Moody exactly as I originally had it, I go back to Street Moody and boom, back to Street Moody. You follow me so far? You can also create custom setting packages for movies on cameras such as the X-T4. In movie mode, the custom setting package area is under the camera, not under IQ, which is a little weird. So for example, Custom 2, I could make my film simulation Eterna, but look at this, huge omission. I cannot set my frame rate or my resolution or those kinds of movie settings in the custom settings packages. It won't allow that. In order to do that, I have to use the Q menu and one of those squares that I assign. So keep that in mind if you're shooting on an X-T4 and you want to add a frame rate to one of your custom setting packages. Now let's put together what we know about the Q menu with what you just found out about the the custom setting packages. As I mentioned, that top left square defaults to the custom packages selector button. Now, the appearance of this button can change depending upon what camera model you're using and whether or not you've ever used the custom setting package before. So if you see it with just the word base, this means that no custom settings package has ever been created before. Nothing's been chosen, nothing's been activated yet. Think of it as sort of off. But once you have created at least one custom package, which we did earlier when we created Street Moody, it now changes and it will say C1. Don't worry about base, we'll get to that in a second. If I select it and then rotate the command dial, there's C1, there's C2, but look at that. You see that? Street Moody, see it? There's 400 dynamic range. That was what I had set. There's my highlights and tones. But keep in mind, as you go through this, that these are totally separate. So for example, instead of dynamic range assigned to this button right here, if I set it to say flicker reduction, right? Okay. Now, when I go back to the Q menu, even though I'm in my Street Moody, and now I don't see dynamic range because I have this other square showing me flicker reduction, my Street Moody preset dynamic range of 400 will still be applied. You've got to remember that there is a separation and a difference between this upper left square, which is what you use to select a custom package setting, which affects the whole camera, versus these other squares, which are just assignable areas that you can quickly access any setting on the camera that you want. And this leads partly, I think, to some of the confusion about the Q menu. Now we come to the most difficult part of understanding the entire Q menu, and that is the base designator and exactly what that means in the menu and in your settings. In order to fully understand this, let's go car shopping. Let's say we found a briefcase full of unmarked $100 bills and we want to buy a Tesla Model S. When you go to create a custom car package, you are starting with the base car of red. That is the base. That is what you're starting with before you make any setting changes. So I'm going to start with this and I'm going to change the color to black. I'm going to add some wheels, change the interior. So what I have here is a different car than what I first saw when I went to the website and started configuring it. The original car was red and had a different interior. I modified the base car of red to something different. However, it still has more or less the same engine, the same parts, the same construction, but I've modified it. What I have here is a car that's based on the original base model that I started with. So for example, let's say you take your camera and you want to go out shooting. You turn your camera on and you go into the Q menu. Right now, I haven't done a thing, so it's set to base C1. Think of it as the original starting point when you first turned on the camera, whatever the settings are that you have in the camera that you haven't changed yet. So it's just the base, the original. Now, if I use the command dial and I change it, let's say I want to change it to now Street Moody. Okay, I'm going to change it to that. Now I'm out in the street and I'm having a wonderful street photography session with C2. Okay. However, if I go back into my Q menu, it says base C2. What that means is that this menu, as I'm looking at it right now, is based on the C2 menu that I had originally set in my custom settings package, the one that I called Street Moody. So for example, if I change it, right, let's say I want to change my sharpness to -2. What I did was I changed one setting. So now if I go back into the Q menu, I see it says base C2. So what this means is that this Q menu is based off of my C2 package. That's the Street Moody package. But check this out. If I go up here and I rotate the command dial, I've got C1, C2. That's the original C2 without the sharpness adjustment I made. And as you can see, I have two of them. I have a base C2 and I have a C2. The base C2 is what I've just been editing when I've been out and about shooting. The regular C2 is the default. It's like the red Tesla. When I first go to the website, it's the base model. And finally, there's one other Q menu item that you should be aware of, and that's the red dot. When you go into your Q menu, if you happen to be working off of, for example, not the base, but the regular C settings, like C2, Street Moody. So if you go to one of these rectangles and you happen to change the setting to a different value, you will see a red dot appear. You will only see that red dot appear if that rectangle setting that you're changing happens to be one of the settings that you're allowed to make for your custom setting packages. Basically, it would be one of the JPEG type settings like clarity, sharpness, white balance, dynamic range, and so forth. However, if I change image aspect ratio, look at this. It doesn't have a red dot. And the reason is because you cannot set image aspect ratio to one of those custom setting packages. And the reason why it changes to a red dot is to remind you that that's something you've changed, but that you do have the option of saving to one of those custom setting packages. So for example, if I change the white balance to say Kelvin, okay, what I could then do is press and hold down the Q button, right? Now, as I'm already in the Q menu, press and hold down the Q button and go right into my C2 Street Moody custom package and save current settings. Boom. Now, if I go into my C2, it now has Kelvin permanently assigned to that package. The red dot will not appear if you change that setting and you are in your base. It only affects when you go into the original copy of your custom setting and then you go to change it. Basically, it's just a little way for your Fujifilm camera to tell you, hey, I noticed that you've changed something, that you have the option of permanently making that change assignable to that custom setting package you're working on. So if you want to do that, the one with the red dot on it is the one you've been working on. I put off using the Q menu for a really long time because I found it confusing and I sort of needed to wrap my head around it. Well, I did, and I'm starting to use it again, and I actually kind of like it. So I hope this video has been helpful to you. And if it has, be sure to give it the like and subscribe. And of course, I will see you in another video again real soon. Take care.